So here we are, Jane, ready to give a preview for the final 2 chapters of this wonderful book.
Right.
A book that the church's anti-racist task force, which you chair, has started as its first project to do a book study of this book that I think has just been excellent. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you for that, Tim. You are also a valuable member of that task force, so as well as 8 other people. And Rebecca, who is our fearless staff leader. Yeah, I think that this has been really good to look at the issue of race and cultural awakening through the lens of faith, because that is obviously why we are all here, to follow Christ. So there are nearly 40 people who have been on this journey with us in the various groups, and so I'm very pleased as well that we've started with this book.
So chapters 9 and 10 deal with awakening and active participation, and they're much easier than the prior 2 chapters on shame and self-righteousness. Self-righteousness in particular is so hard because in that chapter we learned to deal with not having a binary world that some of us are right and some of us are wrong. Right. We're on a journey. Some of us are further along on the journey than others, but we're all on it. And as you said, as similarly with the journey of faith that we're all on. So starting in on awakening, after those 2 difficult chapters, these are pretty easy. But I love the way Daniel Hill starts by talking about an incident in a workshop that he had, in which one of the students said, "Oh, by now I'm very clear I shouldn't ask the question, what am I supposed to do?"
Right.
And then Daniel Hill sends 2 chapters on what we're supposed to do. Right. Starting with chapter 9 and identifying 7 markers. Now, we're not going to talk about 7 markers, but we're going to talk about a couple of them.
Right, exactly. And I'll start with one that sort of stood out to me was the very first one, which he entitles Becoming Theologically Awake. And I really like this because he gets into seeing the full expression of Jesus and in his ministry and mission, and how that really coincides with this journey that we're on. And Jesus, when he was in Nazareth, when he was starting his ministry, opened up the scrolls of Isaiah, and Daniel Hill has this in his book, and I'd like to share what Jesus read, which was, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he ended by saying, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." And then Hill goes on to say, to know Jesus is to know the one who is anointed by the Spirit to proclaim freedom, to heal the blind, and to liberate the oppressed. Jesus definitely hung around with people on the margins, and so I think we are called to do the same thing. So I think seeing the cultural awakening through that lens is very important.
I'd agree. The second marker is recognizing the kingdom battle over the image day. And this really spoke to me. And when Hill says that's why the sin of racism is so serious, the system of race at its core is a reevaluation of human worth. Mm-hmm. You can't have a racial narrative where there's some difference in races and have this image day that we're all creatures of God. And I think Hill says that very well, and saying, there is no racial hierarchy that values people based on their proximity to whiteness, or erase the story of Native people, as one of our politicians just did or tried to do, or that Mexican immigrants are somehow bad, or black people are dangerous. That's what we got to get rid of. We're all in the image of God.
Right, exactly. Yep, I totally agree with that, Tim. And the last one I'd like to highlight from chapter 9 is how, when we're on this awakening journey, we need to change the evaluation of growth from what am I supposed to do to how well do I see? And that's really Daniel Hill's whole premise in writing this book is the journey from blindness to sight. And so Hill emphasizes that we are not engineers who need technical training on how to disassemble and reassemble the pieces of race. Instead, and I thought this was an interesting phrasing, we are blind wanderers who need help to see a world that functions according to a different set of rules than what we have been raised with. So that one I thought was, that spoke to me as well.
And I like this marker as well. I thought it was very important in that, and the paragraph when he says, bracing blindness to sight as our primary transformational motif has important benefits. It helps us know how to engage with friends of color in a new way. It helps us to avoid self-righteousness. There it is. Because no one ever graduates into the position of authoritarian expert. Embracing blindness to sight keeps us hungry and humble. I just think that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Hungry and humble.
Hungry and humble. Yeah, I think that the emphasis that Hill places in this entire book on humility, he just seems to really come from a place of humility himself. I mean, he started out, as we know, in the beginning, trying to establish this multi-ethnic church, and it did not work very well the first time until he, it's a lot of falling down and getting up again, which I think is what we're all doing here. So, but then going on to chapter 10, which is the one on active participation, he does, even though he tells us, don't ask the question, what am I supposed to do? He does give us 10 action steps that we would like to just, you and I here would like to emphasize a couple. Because he does say that even though Jesus' primary work in our lives is to bring us to sight from and light from darkness, nevertheless, Hill and Jesus believed in the value of concrete action. So you're going to talk a little bit about that.
I'm going to go into the first one, which is the continue to educate yourself. And as I think I said at the outset of this study, I owe this church, our church, to beginning my process of getting on this journey with those 12 challenge steps, 21-day challenge steps. That was the starter. And I've read 5 or 6 books. This is the most recent, but I'm going to continue. And I'm going to continue looking for encounters. I'm going to continue educating myself. I think that is an important thing to do.
I totally agree with you, and I have also been doing that. I mean, I think once you start on this journey and once you read a few things that cause you to question what you've believed before, then you can't not see things anymore. So one of his steps that I resonated with was where he says to get proximate or close to suffering, because from our sort of privileged position as white people and as a predominantly white congregation, it's one thing to read about things and to sort of be in our boardrooms and our pleasant surroundings, and that's all good, but it's also important to be near to people who are struggling. So that's one thing he talked about, was to find a place to serve consistently, to learn along, not to be in charge, but to learn alongside people, and to be the learner and the partner, not necessarily the teacher, or not come in and say, okay, you guys are doing this wrong, how can I reverse it and help, but to listen and to learn. And the Center for Hope is one place that I thought of in reading this, because many people in our church are very involved in the Center for Hope ministry and going alongside everyone there.
Yeah, that's one of the incredible things about this church of ours is that there are so many people involved in mission,
Right.
And that's one. And the food efforts that we make, or I could call out some names of people we both know that are
Right.
so much involved in helping others.
Yep.
That's a wonderful thing about the
Yep.
church.
Yeah, exactly.
In the end, he talks about his last active participation statement has to do with following in the footsteps of the pioneer, and he quotes Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, which I just talked about, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles.
Yeah.
And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of faith. Never thought the word pioneer was in the Bible, right?
Right, exactly.
That concept, but there it is. And, we can't see the master plan or precisely where Jesus is leading me, but I can see him carving out the path right in front of me. And if I follow one step at a time, he will protect and guide me into a deeper awakening.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. That one really resonated with me as well. And to quote some more from the end of that, Tim, Hill says, he reminds us that sustenance from the journey does not come from inside me. Courage, the strength, the wisdom, the humility, the direction, they all come from Jesus. He is the pioneer of this faith journey. He is the one who charts the course. My job is to listen for his voice and follow him bravely as he blazes the trail. And that I just thought was a really good reminder to all of us of whom we are following in all of this. When I think about my own beginnings of this, Hill talks earlier in the book about the encounter being sort of the common thread that starts each of us on this journey. And I had a personal encounter in my neighborhood over the last month that kind of got me on things. And since then, before that, I was sort of happily living in somewhat a state of denial and ignorance, and I think probably many of us have been there. And I was more comfortable, to be quite frank. Beforehand, it was comfortable because I didn't have to face things. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to drive through those neighborhoods. But when there was something in our neighborhood, then I thought, whoa, this isn't something that I should get away from. And that's that call of Jesus, I think, on us.
So can you share that encounter?
Oh, it was just really a neighbor, an African-American neighbor who has been not treated on this pleasant suburban street that we have lived on for 34 years, the same way as my white family has. And it just was very eye-opening and very upsetting, and I've started to see things that this blindness to sight, I've started to see things that I didn't see before. So, it's caused me to reassess and to reach out. And that's really kind of what we're trying to do on this, what we've been trying to do with the beginnings of this task force that we're both on, and in the church, and hoping that some more folks will perhaps join us as members of the task force, and be patient with all of our halting steps, because this isn't all laid out neatly. We are trying to follow the pioneer, and I don't know, Tim, are there any other challenges for the congregation that you would have?
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. How do we take the next step? And this has been a great learning process,
Right.
but what's next? And I think it starts with the task force, and I'm looking forward to being able to meet together, and
Right.
and we'll figure it out together. What is the next
Right.
set of steps that we need to take?
Yep. We hope to get some publicity through the church website for some of the readings, that kind of thing. Perhaps some other initiatives of helping community groups, offering our partnership to community groups who celebrating Juneteenth or whatever. I mean, we're just humbly trying to follow, and I would ask for the congregation to be patient and forgiving of us as task force members too, because we're going to mess up here, but I think
I don't know whether we can use this or not, but I mentioned to Kevin in church yesterday my disappointment in reading in the newspaper about how there is no such thing as racism. This was in an editorial comment. There is no such thing as racism in this country. And I know that's a viewpoint out there. And then today I read in the paper that our Dr. Fauci is commenting about how the response to COVID is different for people of color than it is for white people. There it is. So we got a lot to do, and I enjoy your leadership. Keep it up, kid.
Oh, well, thank you for sticking with it as we try to find our way on this journey.